My daughter banned me from her $80,000 wedding because I didn't fit the millionaire in-laws standards. But I exposed their classist messages on Facebook. And the wedding got canceled. The groom was disowned, and they were left broken. I'm 50 years old. I've been working in real estate for like 22 years now. And what happened a few months ago, with my daughter's wedding, basically broke my heart in a way I didn't think was possible, after everything I'd already been through. I mean, I raised Nicole alone for 16 years after her father died in a car accident when she was 10, and I thought I'd already gone through the hardest things life could throw at me. But turns out I was wrong. I guess I should start from the beginning. When Nicole met Jonathan like 3 years ago, because that's when all of this started without me even realizing it. Jonathan seemed like a good guy at first. Honestly, like polite, good manners, worked in finance or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he did, but he made good money. Nicole was head over heels, with that energy you have when you meet someone and you think they're perfect. I was happy for her because after her dad's death, she'd had some difficult years, problems, at school, a couple of relationships that didn't work out, and seeing her that happy made me feel like things were finally working out for us. What I didn't know at that time was that Jonathan's parents, let's say they weren't exactly the type of people I was going to fit in with, but I discovered that later, much later. The first time I met Jonathan's parents was at a dinner they organized at their house. And when I say house, I mean a mansion like the kind you see in magazines, with a huge garden and a fountain at the entrance and all that. I arrived in my 2015 Honda Civic, which by that time already had several years of use, but it worked perfectly fine. And I remember thinking, well, clearly they have more money than me. But that doesn't matter, right? What's important is that our children love each other. Jonathan's mother, I'm not going to use her name because honestly I don't feel like it, greeted me with a smile that now that I think about it was completely fake. Like that smile you put on when you have to be nice but you really don't want to. She asked me a ton of questions during dinner about my work, about where I lived, about my family, and at that moment I thought she was just being polite. But looking back, I realized she was evaluating me. Like, I was a product she needed to inspect before deciding whether it was good enough or not. During the next 2 years, I saw Jonathan's parents like 5 or 6 more times, always in super formal situations. Christmas dinners, birthdays, that kind of thing. And I always felt like something was off, but I couldn't identify exactly what. They were never directly rude to me. You know what I mean? It was more of a subtle thing, like comments about how it was interesting that I worked in real estate, as if it were something weird, or questions about whether I had considered other, more academic or professional careers. I always responded politely because, honestly, I didn't want to create problems. And besides Nicole, I didn't seem to notice anything strange, so I thought maybe it was just me. Insecurities or something like that. Jonathan proposed to Nicole like a year and a half ago. It was a super elaborate proposal at a really expensive restaurant with a ring that probably cost more than what I make in 3 months, and Nicole was over the moon. Obviously, I was happy for her. She's my daughter, my only daughter, and seeing her so excited planning her wedding was something beautiful. The first few months were great. I went with her to see reception venues. We tried cakes, looked at dresses, all that stuff mothers and daughters do when they're planning a wedding. Nicole included me in everything, and I thought we were finally going to have that special moment I'd always imagined. Walking her down the aisle, dancing the mother-daughter waltz. All those things I'd missed when her father died and that now I could experience in a different, but equally meaningful way. But then, like 6 months before the wedding, something changed. Nicole started being weird with me, like she'd respond to my messages late, cancel plans, we had to look at wedding stuff, and when I'd ask her if everything was okay, she'd say yes, that she was just stressed with work and the preparations. I believed her because, well, it's true that organizing a wedding is stressful. I totally understand that. What I didn't know was that behind all of that, Jonathan's parents were getting in her head, telling her things about me, about how I didn't fit with the image they wanted to project at their perfect wedding, about how it would be better if I kept a low profile or something like that. Like 4 months ago, Nicole came to my house on a Sunday afternoon. I was happy to see her because we'd been kind of distant the last few weeks, and I thought we were finally going to sit down and talk about the final details of the wedding. I made coffee, took out some cookies I'd made the day before, and we sat in the living room. She was super nervous, wouldn't look me in the eyes, and I started getting worried, thinking maybe she'd broken up with Jonathan, or the wedding was canceled or something. And then she said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding. And I said, sure, honey. Tell me. And what came out of her mouth next basically destroyed me. She told me, Jonathan's parents don't want you to come to the wedding. Just like that, no beating around the bush. I sat there unable to process what I'd just heard. Like my brain simply refused to understand those words. I said, what? What do you mean they don't want me to come? It's your wedding. I'm your mother. And she started crying and saying she was so sorry that she'd fought with them, that Jonathan had also tried to convince them, but that they were very firm in their decision. I asked her why. I needed to understand why the hell her fiancé's parents didn't want me at my own daughter's wedding, and she said something I'll never forget in my life. She said, they think you don't fit in with their social circle, that your presence could make their guests feel uncomfortable, that it would be better if you kept your distance. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe those words were coming out of my daughter's mouth. I asked her, and what do you think? Do you also think I don't fit in? And she went quiet. That silence was worse than anything she could have said, because it meant that on some level she agreed with them, or at least wasn't willing to fight hard enough for me. I started crying, which I hate doing in front of other people, but I couldn't help it. I told her that I'd worked 2 jobs for years to be able to pay for her piano lessons, her school trips, her college, that I'd sacrificed everything for her, and that now she was telling me I wasn't good enough to be at her wedding because I didn't have the same money as Jonathan's family. Nicole tried to explain herself, saying that she wanted me to be there, that it wasn't what she wanted, but that if she didn't accept Jonathan's parents' conditions, they wouldn't pay for the wedding, and the wedding they'd planned cost like $80,000 or something like that, an absurd amount in my opinion, but apparently normal for them. I told her that if her wedding and the money were more important than her own mother, then maybe she needed to rethink her priorities, and she left crying, and I stayed alone in my house, feeling like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest and stomped on it. I spent that night without sleeping, tossing and turning in bed, crying, getting angry, feeling a horrible mix of sadness and rage that I didn't know how to handle. The next day, I had to show a house at 10 inches the morning, but I called and canceled because I wasn't in any condition to do anything. I stayed in my pajamas all day thinking about what to do, whether I should accept the situation and simply not go to the wedding to avoid causing more problems, or whether I should fight. But how do you fight against people who have so much power and money? And then something occurred to me, an idea that at that moment seemed like the only way to make them understand what they'd done to me, the only way to show them that they couldn't just treat me like trash and get away with it. I opened Facebook, which I mainly use to post photos of houses I'm selling and keep in touch with old friends, and I wrote a long post, very long, telling exactly what had happened. I put all the details. How Jonathan's parents had banned me from my daughter's wedding because I didn't fit in with their social class. How my daughter had accepted their decision, prioritizing an expensive wedding over her own mother, everything. I didn't use bad words or be rude. I just told the facts exactly as they'd happened, but I tagged Jonathan's parents, Jonathan, Nicole, basically everyone who was involved. I clicked publish and closed the laptop. And honestly, at that moment, I thought maybe 5 or 10 people would read it and give me their support, and that's it. I didn't expect what happened next. In the next 2 hours, my phone didn't stop ringing. Facebook notifications every 2 seconds, messages from people I knew and people I didn't know. And when I opened Facebook again, I saw that my post had like 500 shares and hundreds of comments. People were outraged, saying things like, "This is horrible. How can they be so elitist? Your daughter should be ashamed. That family is disgusting." Comments like that. Some of my clients wrote me private messages, saying they couldn't believe what had happened and that they supported me completely. The post kept getting shared, and by the end of the day, it had like 2,000 shares and had reached people who had nothing to do with me, people who were just sharing it because they found the situation outrageous. The next day, like at 8 inches the morning, I got a call from a number I didn't know. I answered, and it was Jonathan's father, the owner of the super prestigious PR firm they always bragged about, and he was desperate, literally begging me to delete the post. He was telling me I was ruining his reputation, that his clients were calling, asking about the situation, that his company was suffering because people were canceling them on social media, that please delete the post and he would personally take care of fixing everything. I asked him, "Fix what? Are you going to let me go to the wedding?" And he said something like, "Well, we can discuss that, but first I need you to delete the post because it's causing terrible damage to our image." I told him no, that the post was staying, that if they were so concerned about their image, maybe they should have thought about that before discriminating against me for not having enough money. He started getting aggressive, saying I was a vengeful and bitter person, that I was using social media to destroy an innocent family. And I just hung up the phone. He kept calling like 15 more times that morning, but I blocked him. Blocked his number, his wife's number, all the numbers I had from that family. That afternoon, Nicole called me, crying hysterically, saying I had to delete the post, that her life was falling apart, that people were attacking her on her social media, that Jonathan's friends were blaming her for the situation, that please mom delete the post. I told her no, that if she had defended her mother this would never have happened, that the consequences of her decisions weren't my problem. I know that sounds harsh, and part of me felt terrible hearing her cry like that. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and rejected, I felt like I was finally getting some power back in this situation. The next few days were absolute chaos. The post kept being shared. It had reached Facebook groups about weddings, groups about classism, groups about family relationships. Basically, it was everywhere. Some people criticized me, saying I was being dramatic, that I should have handled this privately, but most people supported me. What was really interesting was that former employees of Jonathan's parents' PR company started showing up telling their own stories about how they'd been treated badly, how they were horrible bosses, how they discriminated against people who didn't come from wealthy families, basically confirming that my experience wasn't an isolated case but a pattern of behavior from that family. Jonathan called me like a week after the post, not crying like Nicole but clearly very stressed, trying to be diplomatic, saying he understood my pain, but that please think about Nicole, that she wasn't to blame for how his parents had behaved, that if I deleted the post, he would personally make sure I could go to the wedding. I told him it wasn't about the wedding anymore, that it was about principles, about dignity, about showing them that they couldn't just step all over people and expect there to be no consequences. I told him that if he really loved Nicole, he should have defended her from the beginning, instead of letting his parents dictate the terms of their relationship. The wedding, which was scheduled for 2 months after all this drama, was postponed indefinitely. Jonathan's parents said they couldn't hold the ceremony with all the controversy surrounding them, that it would be an embarrassment to their family. I still didn't delete the post. Some people told me I'd done enough, that maybe it was time to let it go. But I felt that if I deleted it, I'd be admitting I'd done something wrong, and I didn't believe that. I still don't believe that. 3 weeks after the drama, Nicole and Jonathan eloped. They went to a registry office and got married without telling anyone. Not me, not his parents, not anyone. I found out through a text message Nicole sent me with a photo of the two of them with their rings, saying they'd decided to get married anyway because they loved each other and didn't want this whole situation to ruin their future. Part of me felt sad not to have been there, not to have seen my daughter get married, but another part of me thought maybe this was better, that it was more honest than all that fake production Jonathan's parents had planned. Jonathan's father disowned him after that. I found out from Nicole. She called to tell me that Jonathan's father had told him that if he married her without his approval, he was going to cut him off completely, and that he'd done it. That basically Jonathan no longer had a family according to his father. I don't know what to feel about that, honestly, because on one hand I think it's horrible that a father rejects his son like that. But on the other hand, I think Jonathan made his decision, knowing the consequences, just like I made mine when I published that post. 1 month after they got married, Nicole and Jonathan showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. I was having coffee in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell and almost didn't open because I thought it was someone selling something, but I opened it and there they were. They looked tired, like they hadn't slept well in weeks. Nicole immediately started crying, saying she was so sorry, that she'd been an idiot, that she should have defended me from the beginning, that she never should have let Jonathan's parents treat me like that. Jonathan also apologized, said he'd been a coward, that he'd let himself be manipulated by his parents out of fear of losing their financial support, that now he understood how wrong he'd been. I stood there at the door, not knowing what to do, because on one hand, part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, but on the other hand, she was my daughter, my only daughter, and seeing her that sorry, that broken, broke my heart in a different way. I let them in. We sat in the living room, the same living room where Nicole had told me I couldn't go to her wedding months before, and we talked for hours. I told them how much they'd hurt me, not just with the wedding ban, but with the whole situation, with making me feel like I wasn't enough, Like my love and sacrifice for Nicole weren't worth anything compared to Jonathan's family's money. Nicole cried a lot that day. She told me she'd been in therapy trying to process everything, that she'd realized how much she'd internalized Jonathan's parents' classist values without even realizing it, that she was working on unlearning all of that. Jonathan admitted he'd been raised in a very privileged environment where he'd never questioned the idea that money and social status were the most important things, and that this whole drama had opened his eyes in a very painful but necessary way. I didn't forgive them that day. I told them I needed time, that they couldn't just expect everything to go back to normal after an apology. They understood, said they'd wait as long as it took, that they were going to show me with actions, that they'd really changed. Over the next few weeks, they started visiting me regularly, not to ask me to forgive them, but just to be present, to rebuild the relationship little by little. Nicole would help me with things around the house. Jonathan helped me fix my car that had an engine problem for months. Small things, but meaningful ones that showed me they were really trying. Eventually, after like 2 months of these visits, I realized that holding on to my anger wasn't doing me or anyone any good. It wasn't a dramatic moment of forgiveness. It wasn't like in the movies where everyone cries and hugs and everything gets fixed magically. It was more of a gradual process of letting go, of deciding I wanted to have my daughter in my life more than I wanted to punish her for her mistakes. I told Nicole I forgave her, that everything that had happened still hurt, but that I was willing to work on our relationship. She promised she would never let anyone disrespect me like that again. No matter who they were. The post is still on Facebook. I never deleted it. Sometimes I get messages from people who find it and tell me their own stories of classist discrimination, of families who rejected them for not having enough money or the right pedigree. It's become something bigger than me, like a symbol of resistance against the elitism and hypocrisy of certain social classes. Jonathan's parents never apologized to me, not even after Jonathan was disowned. And honestly, I don't expect them to. People like that rarely admit they were wrong. Nicole and Jonathan live in a small apartment now. Jonathan works at another finance company where he makes good money, but nothing compared to what he would have inherited from his family. And they're happy. Or so it seems. Nicole comes to visit me like twice a week. We cook together, watch movies, do the normal things mothers and daughters do when they have a healthy relationship. Sometimes she mentions what happened, says things like, "I can't believe I almost lost you because of a stupid wedding." And I tell her what's important is that she learned, that she grew, that now she understands what really matters in life. Last week, Nicole asked me if I could ever completely forget what happened. I told her the truth, that probably not, that pain will always be there in some form, but that doesn't mean I can't forgive, or that I can't move forward. I told her that the love between mothers and daughters is complicated, that sometimes we hurt each other deeply, but we also have the capacity to heal if both sides are willing to do the work. She thought about it for a moment, then hugged me and said, "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me. And that's enough for now, I guess."